show that I've started to make a series of to bring in historical fiction authors who I love and introduce both them and their coming new release. And I'm really excited because my first guest today is Lesley Crewe, who is an author that I have loved ever since I first moved to Nova Scotia. And I've been chasing her around at book shows and stuff just to say hi, and she's always been really accommodating and encouraging. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read to you about Lesley, then I'm going to read the synopsis, and then I want you to sit back, grab a coffee, and relax, because Lesley's going to read to you a little bit from her first chapter of The Spoon Stealer, and then I'm going to ask a couple little, I don't know, nothing questions that she can answer, or make up silly answers or whatever you want. So without further ado, this is Lesley Crewe here with me, and I'm going to read you her bio. Lesley Crewe is the author of Kin, Her Mother's Daughter, Hit and Mrs., Ava Comes Home, Shoot Me, and Relative Happiness, which was shortlisted for the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award and also made into a feature film. Born in Montreal, Lesley lives in Homeville, Nova Scotia, and The Spoon Stealer is her 12th book. This is just a couple things from Lesley from your website, which I love. She says, "I love the ordinary moments. I celebrate everyday things. They are too often lost in the race for something grand. I hold dear our humdrum routines. These accumulating hours make up our lifetimes, and when we remember, it is always the simplest of pleasures that make us happy. These are the memories I create in my books. I got into writing as a way to avoid housework, and I've been on a diet for 60 years with no success. I love books and animals and anyone who will rub my feet." I love that. I love that.
Well, it's obviously all true. Just have to take one look at me and look at my house. Look at me. Anyway.
You're comfy and happy, and that's how we all should be. I'm not showing you the rest of my room because it's quite comfy and happy too. It's like very.
I know. Listen, we've been living in our caves now for months.
Ain't that?
Everybody's the same. We all have this gray halo over our heads, and nobody gives a damn about what their house looks like anymore.
It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to read the little synopsis from The Spoon Stealer, and then Lesley, you're going to take it away, and everybody just sit back and relax, because there's nothing like listening to a reading.
So I'm going to read now?
No, let me read the synopsis, and then it's you. So
okay.
I'm going to read about the book. Okay, this is about The Spoon Stealer. Lesley Crewe's newest novel brings readers from World War I England to 1960s Nova Scotia, following a spoon-stealing memoirist who inherits the family farm and the family. Born into a basket of clean sheets, ruining a perfectly good load of laundry, Emmeline never quite fit in on her family's Nova Scotian farm. After suffering multiple losses in the First World War, her family became so heavy with grief and mental illness that Emmeline felt their weight smothering her. And so, she fled across the Atlantic and built her life in England. Retired, she now lives in a small coastal town with her best friend, Vera, a small white dog. When she joins a memoir-writing course at the library, her past unfolds for her audience and friendships form. She even shares her third biggest secret: she is a compulsive spoon stealer. When Emmeline unexpectedly inherits the farm she grew up on, she knows she needs to see what remains of her family one last time. She arrives like a tornado in their lives, an off-kilter Mary Poppins, bossing everyone around and getting quite a lot wrong. But with her generosity and hard-earned wisdom, she gets an awful lot right too. A pinball ricocheting between people, offending and inspiring in equal measure, Emmeline in her final years believes that a spoonful, perhaps several spoonfuls of kindness, can set to rights the family so broken by loss and secrecy. And I can tell you that one of my favorite reviewers called this one the, what was it, the sleeper of 2020, the sleeper hit, and I loved this book. So I'm going to sit back and listen and relax, and thank you, Lesley. You're on.
Thank you. Well, actually, I mean, it doesn't matter, I suppose, but I pronounce her name Emmeline.
Ah, okay.
Emmeline, as the same as clothesline.
Okay.
Okay. That's so. I'm going to. Genevieve has asked me to read the first 8 pages. Just let me get another swig here.
Let's see that coffee, that mug of yours. Did you show them?
No, it's I forget what it says. I'm not feeling very worky today. I haven't been worky since March. Anyway, I have to read it off a piece of paper, obviously. We don't have an advanced copy, but that's okay. All right, chapter 1. Emmeline Darling suffered a twinge of discomfort in her right hip as she reached over to pull the heavy floral draperies across the pane windows in her sitting room. Beastly weather, she grumbled. This constant damp isn't doing a thing for my rheumatism. Ha! I'd forgotten that. My mother used to say rheumatism. Nowadays it's called arthritis. But I don't think the word has the same panache. What do you think, Vera? Vera was snoring in the chair by the gas fire and had no particular interest in this conversation. Still, it is February, so what can you expect? I must soldier on and go to class, since I missed last week, thanks to that dodgy takeaway. We'll have tea when I get home. Emmeline placed a plaid throw over her dearest friend and kissed the top of her head. Vera remained oblivious. After applying a light smear of Avon Coral Fever to her lips, Emmeline paused in front of her dresser mirror to take a closer look. Her full lips were her best asset, and she'd always been secretly proud of them. So many 74-year-old women had no lips at all, or so it seemed. Not that Emmeline's lips had been kissed constantly throughout her life, but that fact made no difference to her delight in them. When you're a big lady with a large rump and a full bosom with no waist to speak of, you choose one asset to cling to for personal satisfaction. It had to be said that Emmeline was also proud of her hair, which had turned from an unfortunate mousy brown into a glorious icy gray frost. She had scads of it, which she tried to tidy up with hairpins and a tortoiseshell clip, but it always looked like she'd been caught in a windstorm. And it really was a pity that she had to put on rather thick, round glasses in order to see anything, since her remarkably unwrinkled face did look quite striking without them. But one can't have everything in life, so Emmeline pretended she wasn't wearing them and hoped others would do the same. She took off her full-body apron and carefully placed it at the end of her single bed. She'd learned long ago not to throw it, as in her apron pockets were always crammed with various items that would clatter to the floor if she wasn't careful. It was true that this fine lady had a uniform of sorts, wearing only thick beige stockings, a tight, mid-calfed tweed skirt, which made her backside resemble a rather large soup spoon, and a tucked-in cotton or polyester blouse. Silk on formal occasions, but there weren't many of those. And naturally, jumpers when it was chilly in the house. But on days like this, when she was going somewhere, she would take out her Emmeline jacket and fasten herself in. This was something else Emmeline could grin about. Who else had a jacket named after them? And such a classic and sophisticated one at that, with its extended lapels, blouson shoulders, tailored single-breasted lapels, and button cuffs in British herringbone tweed. She felt ready to take on the day when the two Emmelines joined forces. But today she also had to put on her raincoat and accordion rain hat. Then she took her ancient leather carryall from the sideboard, the keys to her 1960 Vauxhall Victor, still in excellent shape after 8 years of driving it sparingly, and the folder she needed for class. One quick peek to make sure Vera hadn't moved, and she was off. The town of Leigh-on-Sea was situated on the northern side of the Thames estuary, and for centuries had been a fishing village and small port on the Essex coast. At low tide, the foreshore had a wide expanse of mudflats and creeks, and all the boats would lie listlessly on their sides until the tide came up again. When Emmeline had moved to Leigh several years before, she used to worry about getting stuck in those mudflats, so she never ventured down to the shore, not at all like the beaches of her childhood. But despite that obvious hazard, the little English town was a gem, with its century-old churches, Georgian architecture, and small shops dotted everywhere. With its pubs and glorious greenery, Englishmen and their gardens thrived here. But what fascinated Emmeline were the number of palm trees sprouting everywhere, How exotic and unexpected. Her favorite listed building was the Lee Library, her home away from home, which looked like it came straight out of a Dickens novel. Red brick, large paned and ornate dormered windows, latticed work on the eaves, a turret on the side, and two huge chimneys reaching to the sky top. Emmeline would often lift her head and gaze at them, knowing they were perfect for Bert, the chimney sweep from Mary Poppins, to come popping out of. She went alone to see the film that told Vera all about it. I do so love the song A Spoonful of Sugar. She sang it for weeks and nearly drove Vera mad. Miss Darling, there you are. We missed you last week, and since it was our first class, rather bad timing on your part. Joyce Pruitt, the organizer of this particular memoir writing class, fancied herself a writer of sorts, having had a few articles and poems published in a local paper. The head librarian always grimaced when Joyce berated people at the front door. Her loud voice could be heard throughout the stacks, but no amount of hinting about keeping it down ever seemed to get to her. Emmeline took off her accordion rain bonnet and gave it a shake in the foyer, deliberately sprinkling water droplets on Joyce's pullover. She disliked the woman, constantly lording it over people. Joyce was well known, being a bit of a bully within the library circle. Her brother Teddy's voice was in her head. Stay away from insincere people. Oh dear, sorry about that, she said, completely insincerely. Joyce wiped the wet away. Never mind, you're here now. You're the last to arrive, as always. Chop, chop. Emmeline pursed her full lips in exasperation as Joyce hustled her into the small room. The space was used for a variety of activities, but Tuesday afternoons were devoted to the written word. And this 4-week memoir class had attracted 6 ladies, who were now crowded around a circular lucite table, sitting in a hodgepodge of uncomfortable chairs. Fortunately, the room was equipped with a small sink and a few cupboards, which held the necessities for making tea. Miss Darling, Joyce fawned, would you be so kind to make the tea? The librarian tells us that no one makes it quite like you. Are you sure you've never worked for royalty? I didn't quite make it to Buckingham Palace, Joyce. I learned to make a cup of tea for my mother. Joyce frowned. Miss Darling could be cantankerous, so she turned her attention to her other chicks gathered around the table. Emmeline plugged in the kettle and waited for the water to boil. A harmless soul named Sybil sidled up to her. I'm quite nervous about reading our assignment out loud, she confessed. My memoirs aren't terribly interesting, I'm afraid. Nonsense, Emmeline almost shouted. Your life is just dreary to you because you're familiar with it. The rest of us will be hearing it for the first time, and that's terribly exciting. Sybil held her fist tightly in front of her. Perhaps you need a pick-me-up. Here. Emmeline rummaged around in her jacket pocket and took out a wrapped humbug. Suck on this. An opera singer once told me they do the trick. It'll give you courage until it's your turn. Sybil looked vaguely unsure. Trust me, mulling things over with your tongue is infinitely more satisfying than wringing your hands. The water reached its boiling point, and Emmeline swished the hot water round and around in the old workhorse of a teapot, emptied it quickly, and then poured in the rest of the boiling water, adding 5 tea bags to the mixture. She reached into the drawer to find something to stir the tea with, and spied it out of the corner of her eye, hidden in the back, lost and forgotten. A very small, ornate spoon that might have belonged to a child's tea set. It gave her pause. She should leave it where it was. Who knew how long it had resided in this drawer? And who was she to take it away? Nope, sorry. She grabbed it and furtively shoved it in the same pocket the humbug had just vacated. In her haste, she reached for a fork and stirred the tea with that. We'll give it 5 minutes and the tea should be done, she said over her shoulder. At last they were ready. All of them with tea in a variety of cups and mugs, the type that tend to gather together after 60 years of random gatherings. Joyce naturally grabbed the favorite. As with most things in life, there was one cup that was clearly better than the rest, and purposely avoided it to build character. Joyce clasped her hands and held them in the air as if in victory. Here we are. Our assignment was to start our memoirs, which I know is a terribly daunting task. One doesn't ordinarily like to draw attention to oneself, so it's a difficult hurdle for some. But alas, writing is tremendously challenging. And this is something you need to learn in a hurry. If it was easy, every Tom, Dick, and Harry would be at it. Like those dratted individuals, Thomas Hardy, Richard Hughes, and Henry James, Emmeline said, smirking. The ladies chuckled until they realized their leader wasn't amused. Joyce looked at her roster. Emmeline and Sybil weren't here last week. Can I assume something catastrophic happened to keep you away? You know it throws the other members off to have to repeat lessons. Sybil turned a bright pink. I had to take me man to the surgery. I do hope she's feeling better, Joyce said. The swelling has gone down, Tom. Joyce turned to Emmeline and waited. Do you really want the details of my gastric battle with a Vindaloo takeaway, Joyce? Perhaps not. She turned away. Sybil, would you please read what you've written for the class? Emmeline could see Sybil hastily crunch the rest of her humbug and swallow it down quickly before quickly glancing at her for moral support. Emmeline smiled encouragingly. My name is Sybil Witherby, but I only became a Weatherby after I married our Cyril when I was 18. I was flat before that. Me man hated Cyril and kicked me out of the house. But after 20 years, we made up, and now I take her to surgeries for her various ailments. She's got wicked wind and gout and eczema and liver failure and an enlarged heart. She calls herself the Grinch because of her enlarged heart, and everyone has a great laugh over it. Sybil died last year, and we never had kids, so I'm always looking for something to do, like take a writing class. The end. There was complete silence before Sybil lifted her face from the page in front of her. Emmeline, a desperate. Emmeline reached out her hand and placed it on Sybil's arm. You see, Sybil, you had nothing to worry about. Your life is an intriguing tale of bravery, true love, and sacrifice. A young girl thrown out on her own, but undaunted because she had the love of her life beside her. In spite of the challenges her family put in her way, she made the courageous decision to forgive her mother and is now a loving caretaker, despite her own heartbreak at losing her beloved Cyril, gone too soon. Instead of giving up, she's throwing herself into other interests and making a difference in the world. I say bravo to you. Everyone, except Joyce, gave Sybil an enthusiastic ovation. Sybil looked completely overwhelmed and turned an even brighter shade of pink. Once things settled down, Joyce nodded at Emmeline. I believe it's your turn. Emmeline took her folder and folded it open on the table. Her document was held together by a large paperclip and a wide elastic, just in case. My good woman, Joyce said, scowling. You weren't supposed to write a novel. I've been at this project for a while, long before I knew about this class. It's a memoir of sorts. You can read 5 pages, Miss Darling. That should suffice. Remember, we're a class of beginners, not for people interested in being published. I have no intention of being published, Emmeline shot back. My story is my own and not for the public. Very well, let's get on with it. We might need a timer at this rate. Emmeline ignored the remark, took a swig of tea, and cleared her throat. Apparently, a summer morning in 1894 was the perfect time for hanging out a wash. The kind of day when the sun shone so bright in the clear blue sky that white cotton sheets dazzled before your eyes, making you almost blind. The wind snapped pillowcases and clean towels back and forth like waving flags, and the smell of the grass and the hay made you think that life was definitely worth living. At least that's what I was thinking when my mother gave an almighty screech and reached down between her apron and long skirt in an attempt to catch me before I fell from between her legs into a basket full of freshly laundered linen. She didn't grab me in time, and I don't think she ever forgave me for bloodying those beautiful white sheets. But the scent of sun-drenched fresh cotton in that meadow of wildflowers, mixed with the salty sea air and the aroma of fir trees, is still the most heavenly fragrance on earth. I feel it belongs only to me, which is nonsense, of course, but then that's how I've always seen the world. It's mine alone. And that attitude tried my mother's patience on an almost daily basis. She had no idea what to do with me. My 4 older brothers were a piece of cake, according to her. They did as they were told in front of her, and what they got up to behind her back had nothing to do with her. If it was something untoward, Father would deal with it out in the back shed. But my brother Teddy told me that our father only took the strap down so Mother could see him taking it out back. He never used it on any of my brothers and swore them to secrecy, to which they readily agreed. It's a very odd feeling to know that your mother doesn't like you very much. I mean, she loved me, I think, but she never thought of me as a friend and someone she could confide in. Or maybe she wasn't used to jabbering away with another female after living with 5 men for so long. But she did teach me to make a good pot of tea, and she let me help with the baking, and she is behind my love of the full-length apron. I don't think I ever saw her without one, except to go to church or a funeral. I realized early on that you could carry vast amounts of random items in the pockets of an apron. It was the first thing she ever gave me, out of necessity, she said, and I loved it more than anything else. It was always a fight to make me take it off before going to school. I remember my brother Teddy bought me a doll once, and I tried to love it, but it wasn't until my mother fashioned a small apron for it that I carried it everywhere. Sybil put up her hand. Sorry to interrupt, but your mother made your doll an apron. That tells me she liked you. Emmeline blinked, and then blinked again. I never thought of it like that. I believe you're right. A gal named Flora, who had a long, lean face that resembled a greyhound, shook her head in disbelief. Imagine being born in a basket. They should have called you Moses. Una, who had a head full of curlers under her kerchief, spoke up. Where was this? Sounds like heaven. Nova Scotia. Where? Canada. Oh, Ducky, you're a long way from home. Joyce tapped the table a few times. Miss Darling will never get through this narrative if you continually ask her questions. We'll save our opinions until the end, please. Everyone leaned forward to hear more. That's it.
I love that. I love that. Joyce is so perfect. She's just perfect.
She's such a creep.
Okay.
I love writing the characters around other characters, because you get to live, you get to say things that you would never say in your real life.
I love that. So when you're writing dialogue, are you always speaking out loud when you're writing it?
Do I speak it out loud? No.
You just hear it in your head, and then you just keep going on it.
Yeah. No.
I hear it in my head, but then sometimes I read it out loud and go, yeah. But I love your group conversations. They're just perfect. Okay. I just want to ask one question, because my Zoom notification says stop talking soon, so I have to do that. It says
you have to what?
It says I have 5 minutes left of my time, so I didn't realize there was a timer on this. So I'm going to ask you one question, because this one I've been wondering this. This is your 12th book, plus you've written for magazines and newspapers. How long have you been writing, and did you always want to write?
Like I say, it was always called the writer in the family. I never wrote a thing. The only thing I wrote were letters home, because I lived in Cape Breton and my family was in Montreal, and my dad was a writer. But I always had diaries, and I took English in university, and I always loved it, but I never really had time for it, which is so odd, because I couldn't call myself a writer because I never wrote anything. And when I started all this, I had no intention of being published. So I just see all this as sort of a diary run amok. I like writing about life, and it's how I make sense of things. So my first book, Relative Happiness, I wrote that just for myself, and I had no intention of ever being published, but it was just sort of a weird fate that I did, and so I've enjoyed it. Now I'm enjoying it. It's just a hobby. It's just something I like to do instead of knit.
Isn't that funny? Because people ask me, what's your hobby? And I'm thinking, writing. Well, what's your career? Writing. I don't know. I love it so much. That's what I want to do.
It's just how you have to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
there's people, like I say, people dance, people sing, people, it's just how you see things. And I always have to write something down. I'll make it know that it's real, and I love storytelling, and I love memories, and that's what I loved about Cape Breton when I was a kid, when I would come here for the summer. It was all the stories my grandmother and great aunts would tell me, and I kept all those. I don't have a great memory. I have a terrible memory, and which drives me crazy because my father died of Alzheimer's, so I panic every time I can't think. But I remember every little story my grandmother ever told me about putting papers down on the floor when she mopped. Do you know what I mean? Like all these little tiny details. And I thought it was just fascinating. And I kept all of this stuff in my head. So every so often, whenever I need it, I'll remember something. I'll think, perfect. I'll put that in. I'll put that in somewhere.
You're so lucky to have retained all of that. I wish I could go back and do that myself, but that's amazing. So I'm going to have to ask you, what inspired you to write this one?
This one? Well, this one is like most of my books there are aspects of my own family stories in here. Actually, this one takes a lot from family history. So with World War I and my grandfather and his family. So I'm really excited to be able to have my family read this, because for my cousins and things like that, so they can get a chance. So I put everything that I know that I've since found out about our family, I've put in here, and I think they'll get a great kick out of that.
Oh, they're gonna love it. I loved it. Everybody I know that's picked it up so far has gone, this is so unexpectedly beautiful. I just love this so much. And I know I was just dancing around. I've read it again, and I want to read it to my husband, but he always falls asleep when I start to read to him, so that's just not going to go anywhere. But and I hope everybody reads it. I want everyone outside of Nova Scotia to read it and understand such a beautiful story. So thank you for doing this with me today. And
thanks,
braving.
Thanks, Genevieve. It was awfully kind of you, because I never would do this kind of thing if it wasn't for you.
Well,
trying to get better at social media, but it's not my bag. But so I need somebody like you to help me. So this has been a wonderful opportunity, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Bye.